Welcome back to Cards and Comics, and today I want to do a video where I really talk about how and why I started collecting cards and the four events that happened during the early part of my collecting experience that really shaped how I collect today. And I really want to give some background because I feel like it's important to talk about these stories, and some of these things will never happen again because the industry's completely changed from when I first started. So we'll go with where I grew up. I know most of these background stories start, with the town and when it was founded. I'm not going to go that far back. I just want to show you that I'm from a very small town in Oklahoma called Locust Grove. And the picture on the right here, for me anyway, is really how my town looked when I grew up. And in fact, the store on the very far right, the last store with the white awning, was a convenience store that I actually would buy cards from. In fact, the first cards I ever bought were from that store. And then the gas station, that's hardly to see, but with a big sign that says Food Mart on it, was where my mom worked, and I would go there and buy cards there as well, and comic books. Actually, that was the one place I used to buy comic books all the time as well. So this is a small town, and so the access to cards and the access to anything like that was very limited. So you had to go somewhere else to get anything, and for the most part, growing up in Oklahoma, the nearest big city for me was, Tulsa, and that's where I actually spent a lot of my time collecting cards because that's where they were. Now, going into the time period it was 1986 is when I really started. Now, I had been around collecting. I had talked to my friends who showed me cards. I'd been over to people's houses and their dads had cards, but I really wasn't interested until 1986. And the reason why I really got into it in 86 was because one of my best friends was trying to put together a 86 football set. And then I thought, well, it'd be fun if we both try to do it together. And then a lot of kids at school were collecting. And so in 86, I really went in and was interested in buying packs. And so these were what was really available in 86. You had Topps baseball, Topps football, and you had Fleer basketball. And I bought a heck of a lot of baseball, a whole ton of football, but no basketball because I was told at the time was basketball had no value. And I had gone to a few card stores locally because there was local card stores in Pryor, Oklahoma. And a lot of the dealers would say, yeah, like basketball is worth nothing. Baseball is where it's at, and football is, an also ran number two, but don't buy basketball because it's not worth anything. Obviously, those kind of that advice was not great then. Similar today, and people are telling you don't buy something or it's not worth anything. Maybe follow your own thoughts and your own opinions because sometimes those folks are completely wrong. But this was the time period where I really started, 1986. So I started buying packs of 86 football and baseball, really trying to put together either full sets or team sets. And so I really had an idea of collecting as a set, not for individual players. And unfortunately, my football cards ended up being just given away to friends because I got so interested in baseball that I didn't care about the football cards. I just gave them away. I probably had 10 or 15 Jerry Rice rookie cards that I threw away because I probably had, I probably bought over 186 football packs back in the day because they were so cheap and they were fun to collect. And I was trying to get my Steeler team set back in the day. So kind of unfortunate, but that's how it goes as a kid because, you didn't realize these things were worth a lot of money. Now, 1989 was really this first major event in my life in collecting. And to give you some background, I had been collecting for a few years. King Griffey Jr. was the new hot thing. The 89 Upper Deck rookie card was out. And so I bought this baseball card magazine because I had him on the cover. But there was an article here. And if you read this cover, front cover, you'll see it says Team Set Collecting, the Affordable Alternative. I never thought about collecting vintage cards until I read this article. In this article, it stated that, there was a lot of people who collected teams, their favorite teams, and they focused on the years that their favorite team won, the World Series or was a really good team or whatever you wanted to do. But, it was a good way to collect. And then, being a Pittsburgh Pirates fan, at the time, still am, unfortunately. But, I thought, well, what years did the Pirates actually win? And so that made me think about, well, could I collect those cards, and would it be a fun way to actually collect cards? Because you got to remember, I had just gone through 86. Was the whole point of buying football was to collect my Steeler team set. So I was already in the kind of mindset of team set collecting. Now, this baseball card magazine had one other thing that was peculiar, and at the time I didn't really even think about it, was this rookie card that was inserted in that magazine that's worth a lot of money today. I probably threw it away because at the time we thought these cards were just like fakes or reproductions or whatever. I probably didn't even keep that card when I read the magazine. So I was thinking about, team set collecting, right? And so when you think about team sets, well, the Pirates' first World Series, team that had cards I could really collect, because obviously I can't go back to Honus Wagner as a kid, was the 1960 Pirates team that won the World Series. And as a kid, I really looked at it and said, should I collect the 60 set, which had players who weren't even on the 1960 Pirates team set, which has players who weren't even on the World Series team, because obviously you're always 1 year behind when you look at baseball cards. So the 60 set actually chronicled the 59 year, whereas the 61 set actually chronicled the 60 year. And the fact there's World Series cards in the 61 set really cemented my want to buy the 61 team set. So that's why I decided that I would put together the 61 Pirate team set. And then I looked at the other years. Well, then I needed to collect the 72 team set and the 1980 team set, because the Pirates also won the World Series in 71 and 79. But I'd start here. And so the big event was Eastland Mall, which is no longer around in Tulsa, Oklahoma, would do mall shows. And so sometimes I would go with my mom to go shopping. And so we went to Eastland Mall. I didn't think anything of it. And they were actually having a mall show. And so I had never been to a card show before. So this was a huge event. I never knew that you could go to a card show, that they even existed, but that there would be tons of dealers. And the thing that was even more funny was, I would go around to dealers and asking for 61 pirate cards, and they would be like, yeah, like, why are you collecting, pirate cards? Why do you care about, Smokey Burgess? And, I explained to them, and then it's funny how many dealers try to convince me I should be collecting the 60 pirate team set instead of the 61 team set, because the 60 set was the year that they won the World Series. And I kept saying, well, the 61 set has the All-Star cards and the World Series cards, but it was an interesting conversation where dealers would try to talk me out of buying 61s. Now, Eastland Mall, this is kind of what it looked like inside. So you could see you had a mezzanine. And so the cards dealers are all around, wrapped around the mezzanine. And unfortunately, as a kid, I didn't realize that there was more than just that one little section. That actually, if you turned the corner, there was even more card dealers. And so I only went to probably like 6 dealers that day before we had to go. And but it was still like one of the best events of my life. Made a huge impact on me in terms of just the fact that card collecting was so big, that there were so many people doing it. And you can see, like, from mall shows, very similar, how they're packed. I could only see, these 5 or 6 dealers at one time. And so I did make the mistake of just staying in one spot. And again, what I took away from that show was about 4 or 5 61 pirate team cards, or pirate cards from the team set. And one of them I really remember was Smokey Burgess, because at the time I was actually reading about the 60 team itself. I was looking at articles. I was trying to read about the team itself. And I read where, Smokey Burgess was actually a pretty big player. He was a pinch hitter, had a lot of stats for a pinch hitter, and was also the backup catcher. And so it was really cool to get a player I'd heard about, because a lot of the players I picked up were like, not big time players yet. And he was the best card I probably picked up at the show. And it had writing all over the card. So instead of just, a card being a card, there was like somebody did mathematics on the front of the card, but I didn't care as a kid. And that was, one of those things that, as a kid, you don't really think about, was condition. And so I went home and I showed my dad what cards I picked up, from the show that I went to with my mom. And he was really interested, and he was looking at the cards. And then he got to the Smokey Burgess and he said, why didn't you find a better copy? And I said, well, I didn't think about it. I was just looking for cards. And he's like, well, you should buy cards in good shape because they'll be worth more if you buy them in good shape. I don't think you should be buying cards that have mathematics written on the front. I'm like, okay, well that's a good thought. I didn't ever even think about it, and and I could tell that he was actually thinking about cards at that time, and he was a Cardinal collector, and so I think it sort of seeded a little bit of a thought in his mind. So the second major event that I really shaped my collecting interest and how I collect was in 1990. So so the Tulsa baseball card store, which was kind of famous in the area, it sponsored these 80s and 90s minor league cards like the Tulsa Drillers here, Tulsa Drillers here, and the thing that's cool about this shop was it actually received the first delivery of 89 Upper Deck as a store. So it kind of had a lot of clout in the hobby industry at one point. It was a pretty big store. Well, one day my dad, went on his lunch and went to the store without telling me, and so he came to pick me up from practice. I was a wrestler, and he showed me that he picked up two cards. One of them was a 70 Stargell, and the other card was a 69 Clemente that he found at this store. And me and my friends that were on the team were just like mesmerized by Hall of Fame cards. Seeing cards from the 60s and of big time players was just amazing, and I was like super stoked that my dad just went to the store and bought cards for me on his lunch break, and it was just so cool. And it really, and then I was like, okay, I'm all in now. Like, this is cool. My dad's into it, so we're going to collect together, and that's really what started us collecting as a team. And all these years later, so it really made a big impact. Now, the third major event that that really started me into this path was again at this Eastland Mall, and this is really when I was older, and so this is I was already in college, and at this point I was been collecting for 10 years, so I thought I knew stuff. I thought I was a collector. I thought I was cool. I thought I knew how to do this. So I was at the show myself. I could drive, had my own car, and so I ran into a dealer I'd seen before at shows. And, at this time, really, the big thing was inserts, right? In 1996, you got to remember at this time, older vintage cards were pretty tough because no one really agreed on condition. No one really could sit around and buy vintage cards because, in my opinion, because you always took the risk that things were damaged or, not what they said they were. And so vintage to me just didn't have as much appeal, but these new insert cards, they were actually limited, harder to find. And so at the time, a lot of these insert cards were the new thing that everybody wanted, right? So I pulled out of a pack this 96 Alex Rodriguez. And, obviously A-Rod in 96 was huge. It was even hotter probably at that point than Griffey. And I had a dealer offer me a beat up 68 Mickey Mantle for this A-Rod card. And I told the dealer, I said, well, I really want a Mickey Mantle card. I do like vintage, but let me call my dad and see what he thinks because, we're in this together. He said, fine, go call your dad. So I went to a payphone. I didn't have a cell phone. Call my dad, and he's like, no, don't do it. Unless that Mickey Mantle is a nice card. He's like, don't do it. That A-Rod might be a couple $100 card. We don't know how rare it is. You just pulled out of a pack. Obviously, he wants it, so it might be worth something. I said, okay. So I went back to the dealer. And at the time, I had left my A-Rod card there, and I had actually had the Mickey Mantle in my hand. And he said, well, you left the table, so the deal is done. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, you walked away with the card. I said, well, I told you I was going to call my dad. And he's like, yeah, I know, but if you walk away from the table, then the deal is done. And, I have your card, you have my card. And I said, well, I talked to my dad, and he said, he didn't think I should do the deal. And he's like, yeah, well, you walked away. So, lesson learned. And so from this point on, I knew that dealers weren't your friends for the most part. Do I have friends that are dealers? Sure. But do I trust dealers when I just walk up to them? No. They're there to make money and I view them more like used car salesmen than your buddies, right? So that really made me double think about, hey, when I'm in this hobby, I have to protect myself. I can't just, trust that the dealers are going to do the right thing. And then at the same show, just to kind of, reinforce this whole issue was I bought a 71 Clemente, and I had, basically, worked in the summer and saved up my money, and so I paid, over what this card was worth in Beckett, because that's all we had to go on this time, thinking this card was really nice. And then when I got home, my dad looked at it and found a crease in it. And so I bought this card as being near mint, and it had a crease. So obviously I just, ruined that amount of money too. So it was a really negative experience, and it really kind of set me off in a different direction a little bit, where I really didn't want to collect vintage anymore. Also, I was really into Magic the Gathering at the time in college. I was playing competitively, and so I just spent more money on those cards than actual sports cards. And it really just left a bad taste in my mouth in terms of what I was going to do next. And so I actually spent more focus on modern cards if I was going to collect them. In '97, I spent a lot of money on Finest and putting together that set. In baseball, the colored refractors, that was more fun for me than going back and trying to find vintage cards that I just knew were going to be damaged, because of just the history in my whole experience has been that vintage cards were, dealers just didn't tell you the truth on condition. And so I really just focused from '96 on until I graduated college, on modern cards. Now in 1998, the last major event happened, and this is really what began the journey I'm still on today. And back in those days, you couldn't, eBay wasn't really a thing. To do auctions, you got these auction flyers like this from '95 from Leland's, but you did sports cards by basically getting an auction and looking at the cards and buying. And then I had noticed in these auctions, because they would publish the results sometimes, and online you could see some results, and PSA had a website at some point around this time where you could look at things. I kept noticing that the graded PSA cards were bringing all this extra money. And so, I didn't know really how to get into bid on these auctions. But a buddy of mine said he had been buying cards through this company called When It Was a Game, or WeWag, on a phone auction. And so he gave me a flyer. I looked at it and I saw, that there was a 61 Clemente PSA 8 for sale in that auction. Now, When It Was a Game is the same company that got sued for faking slabs. But again, this was much later that they were sued for this, and this is true. They faked PSA slabs, and they got sued, and so yes, they were definitely not a great company later on. But that was, again, about 5 years later. This is when they did the phone auctions. They had a 61 Clemente, and you got to remember, I didn't even, there was like a black and white photo and this magazine, or this kind of like just kind of homemade looking flyer that you got. And I saw it. I'm like, well, I'm going to take a shot. And I paid like over $100 more than the Beckett price at the time for this card. And then I got it in hand, and it was so amazingly nice compared to any vintage card I had before, that I couldn't understand why there was even 2 grades higher. I'm like, this is the nicest vintage card I've ever had. I showed it to my dad, and then he was like, yes, this is by far the nicest card you've ever owned. It's the nicest card I've ever seen. And I can't believe that this card is an 8 versus a 10. And so from then on, we both said, basically that, well, these PSA graded cards are the future. People pay more for them because the condition's so immaculate. We understand now. And then from then on, I was really into graded cards, for better or worse. And I've been ripped off. When What Is a Game actually got me later on with some cards. I did a video about it. But again, this was really the idea that vintage cards now could be bought and sold. And right after this, eBay became a bigger thing. Buying cards through eBay became much easier because they were graded, and the rest is history. And so, I became a big, collector of vintage cards, still focusing on Pirates and Roberto Clemente. I put together the basic Clemente set. I'm still looking for some of the master set, even though I probably won't ever get it, but still fun to look for those kind of really rare cards. But it really shaped how I collect, how my dad collected, how we went out to shows together. And, it does show that, you learn, you evolve, and then you kind of get a focus, and then that becomes you. And that's sort of how I became what I do today, and why I collect what I collect in terms of sports cards. I like to hear your comments. And the one thing I will say is I still have those 61 pirate cards, the 72 pirate cards that I collected as a kid. And at the end of the video, I will show those off for anyone who wants to remain and see them. I have my, the original cards still there, and if not, then I'll see you next time. Hopefully, you can leave me your collecting stories and share with me how you started. But this is kind of my origin story, for better or worse. And I'll see you next time. Bye. All right, here is some bonus content for today. And I said if you stuck around, I would show you. This is my actual 1961 top set that I put together when I was in high school. It's in the same kind of 30 card team set that Ultra Pro or somebody made back in the day. I'm not even sure they still make this anymore. But you can see I've got the short print team card. I'm trying to hit the camera. I got the Clemente, the Mazurowski, which says the short print, but I'm not really sure. Now I went through here and, as a kid putting this together, right? Getting cards, just any condition, but the Clemente was a major pickup for me, even in the raw shape it's in. Because it was still expensive as a kid. When back then $20 was expensive. But you can see I've got all the players now that I've had this for so long, and I've gone to multiple moves that it's not in the greatest condition anymore. It's just a little bent, actually not creased. I was actually thinking that it would have got more damaged over time. I'm probably going to take this out and probably just get the cards framed and put them in a frame. If you ever went to a place to get framing done, it's actually pretty expensive. But the one card that I want to point out is this Smokey Burgess right here. It's not the original one because it doesn't have the math all with the face. I actually replaced it before, back in the late 90s when I put this set together. Now I want to show you another card as I kind of flip through here. So one of the things that I was really upset with when I put a set together was the fact that there was no Wilmer Mizell card. So Wilmer Mizell was a starting pitcher for the Pirates, and if you look at the 61 or the 60 team, right, your star pitchers were Bob Friend and Vern Law, and I believe this is the year Vern Law won a Cy Young. Roy Face was the big reliever out of the bullpen, but the unsung guy that people don't talk too much about is Wilmer Mizell. Wilmer Mizell won 14 games, but he also won 2 games in the World Series. And so it was when I was reading about the team, I was really upset because they didn't actually have a Wilmer Mizell Topps card. I think he fell into that weird period where he didn't sign a contract with Topps, kind of like Stan Musial and a few other players didn't, because obviously he was a good player. I mean, he won 14 games. He had a 3.36 ERA. So, the guy was a good pitcher. Won 2 games in World Series, so he should have had a card. But he didn't. The other card here that's really rare is this Joe Gibbon, which is a high number short print. And the other card that's very interesting that's in this set, and which this is the good or bad thing about including kind of late changes, after the season has happened. Bobby Shantz is in this set as a Pirate, but he played for the Yankees, who the Pirates actually beat in the World Series in 1960. He was traded to the Pirates in the offseason. And so instead of keeping him with the Yankees, they put his card as a Pirate, and which kind of sucks because he actually played for the Yankees that year in 60 and played actually against the Pirates in the World Series. And Clem LeBlanc actually played for the Tigers and didn't actually play for the Pirates. So, but I had to have them because they were part of the the team set, but they were not on the 60 team. And that's sort of what you get sometimes when you do those called after the fact kind of cards, where they make changes. Now, I want to show also to you my 72 set, Pirate team set. So I'll show that off. So you can see again the team card, the Stargell, the Clemente, Al Oliver, Mazeroski. And again, I put these all together when I was a kid. And I've had them ever since. And again, my goal is to do it again as kind of a framed, go and get it framed. I may actually do it myself. Me and my daughter may actually do it as a project. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Now, I don't actually have this team set completed. I went to college. It was definitely not the priority compared to my 61 set. So there's a few players missing. But I do have most of the World Series cards, which I thought was cool. Now, in terms of these sets, when I became, more of a PSA graded card collector, the first thing I did, obviously, in my video I talked about was buying a 61 Clemente. But the very next thing I did was I started putting together my team sets again, but as graded. And I have both the 61, 72, and 79 Pirate team sets completed in PSA 8 or better. In fact, I have two 61 Pirate team sets, one in 8 and one in 8.5 that I'm putting together. I have an 8 set that's completed. My 8.5 set is about, or 9, 8.5 or 9, is about 70% done. So I almost have two full team sets of Pirate cards from 1961. And I have my Clementes in 8.5. And then in the 72 set, I have most of those cards are either 8s or 9s. I have a good mix of both. In 79, they're mostly 9s or 10s. Or sorry, the 80 set is mostly 9s or 10s. So there it is. It's my little bonus coverage if you want to see what the cards looked like from back in those days that I was collecting. And if you ever want to see the actual graded team sets I have, let me know and I'll show you the cards I actually have. And I actually have a third team set for the 61 Pirate team set I've been working on, which is an autographed team set. So one of my holy grails that I have is a 61 Clemente autograph that's in a PSA DNA holder. So there it is, guys. That's my update, our bonus coverage of my video today. Thanks. Bye.